Most people think time is like a river that flows swift and sure in one direction, but I have seen the face of time, and I can tell you they are wrong. Time is an ocean. In a storm you may wonder who I am and why I say this. Well, sit down, and I will tell you a tale like none that you have ever heard. Once upon a time, a king named Shahraman, his son, and a company of men are traveling from Persia to visit Azad when they pass through India. While there, Shahraman meets the Maharaja's advisor called the Vizier. The Vizier convinces Shahraman to attack the Maharaja's kingdom on the promise of honor and glory. When the Vizier kills one of the guardsmen at the gate, he signals Shahraman's company with a flaming arrow. Shahraman and his army began their attack on the Maharaja's kingdom before dawn. During the battle, the Vizier reminds the Persian king, King Shahraman, the father of the prince and a ruler of a kingdom of Persia. Shahraman was known to be a merciful leader. Shahraman and his army began their attack on the Maharaja's kingdom before dawn. During the battle, the Vizier reminds the Persian king of his promise and mentions that the Maharaja's treasure vaults lie within the walls of the kingdom. Eager to prove himself Shahraman's son, the Prince of Persia rides ahead to enter the palace. He is thrown from his horse just as the entrance to the palace crumbles and narrowly misses being crushed by falling debris. When he comes to, several of his father's men are trying to break down the large double doors, but are killed by a catapult attack that barricades the door with more debris. The prince heroically makes his way to a higher ground. Traversing broken paths and bridges, he fights his way to the Maharaja's treasure vaults with relative ease, and he is drawn toward the glowing hourglass and a dagger hidden deep inside the treasure vault. Once the prince is able to reach the very top of the treasure vault, he steals the glowing dagger that he spotted on the other side of the vault's wall. A debris fallen into his head. Looking upon the eyes of death, the prince, unknowingly clicking the button on top of the dagger, discovers that the dagger can control time itself. When he witnesses falling debris above him going and moving in reverse, allowing him to dodge it before time is restored to its normal flow, he rejoins with his father, who has taken the hourglass as a prize for the Sultan of Azad, who betrayed the Maharaja when he aided King Shahraman. In return for a share of the spoils, demands to have the dagger. He was promised his choice of the Maharaja's treasure, but to the vizier's frustration, King Shahraman refuses to let him take the dagger of time from his son, who captured it first. It is his just reward. Before they depart from the Maharaja's kingdom, his daughter, Farah, is taken as a prisoner with several other women. During the journey to Azad, the prince barely notices that he is being observed by the scornful eye of Farah. At the palace of Azad, Shahraman presents the spoils of his conquest to his friend, the Sultan, and uses the sands of time as a way to show gratitude toward the Persia and Azad's alliance. The Sultan, fascinated by the seemingly enchanted sand that glowed in the hourglass, inquired about its nature. The Vizier describes the sands of time as a marvel no living man has ever seen. He plays on the pride of the prince and Shahraman when he suggests that the prince use the dagger of time to open the hourglass and free the sands of time and to use its marvelous powers. The prince steps forward and inserts the dagger inside the hourglass of time, ignoring the frantic shouts of Farah, who tried to stop them. But with the sands freed from the hourglass, the sands of time began to transform everyone in the room except the prince and the vizier. The vizier demands that the prince give him the dagger so that he can undo what he had done. The prince refuses and witnesses all and everyone in the room, including his father, turning into creatures of sands. The prince escapes the sultan's throne room before the entrance is blocked by debris. The sands of time makes short work for all living things in the kingdom, transforming into sand creatures. Ahead of him, Farah manages to escape the throne room with other members of the sultan's court, but chooses to remain behind. Farah helps the prince learn how to use the dagger of time and fight his way through the reception hall occupied by sand creatures. During the fight, he begins discovering the abilities that come with using the weapon against the sand creatures. Only the prince, the vizier, and Farah remain unchanged by the sands because of the artifact of time. They carry with them the dagger of time, the vizier's staff, and Farah's medallion. The prince slowly learns how to use the sands to his advantage, utilizing the power of precognition to traverse the ruined palace. He pursues Farah, the daughter of the Maharaja, who refuses to stop whenever he catches up to, until he brought outside the palace and witnessed two sand birds carrying the hourglass of time to the Tower of Dawn. When he re-enters the palace and reaches the ground level, he is pulled aside by Farah, who demands that he relinquish the dagger of time to her so she can undo his actions. The prince refuses to trust her, believing she was no better than the vizier that once worked for her father. When they are attacked by the scarabs, transformed by the sands of time, Farah agrees to meet the prince at the reception hall. The prince fights his way through the palace until he reaches the Azad defense system, where one of the palace guards has managed to reach without harm. The prince acts as the guard's second and reactivates the palace's defense system. The Azad guard is quickly transformed into a sand creature that the prince fights off. When he eventually makes it back to the reception hall, Farah is fighting off several sand creatures led by his transformed father. Farah and the prince are able to defeat the transformed soldiers until only his father is left to fight. After the prince defeats him, he decides to ally himself with Farah to return the sands of time to the hourglass by using the dagger of time. For the duration of their journey, the prince and Farah rely on one another to reach the Tower of Dawn, using their unique abilities to their advantage. The two grow more comfortable in each moment passes with each other's company. Their rapport becomes less standoffish and more genuine as they reveal more and more of themselves to each other. The prince eventually begins to form romantic affection for Farah. He speculates that she feels the same for him. After they reunite, after being separated for an extended period of time, the prince begins to experience visions of Farah stealing the dagger of time in the future. and begins to question her motives. Farah's determination to reach the Tower of Dawn becomes more apparent and aggressive the higher into the Azad Palace they go. Her seemingly cavalier attitude toward the prince and their surroundings makes him question whether or not she realizes the severity of their situation. When they reach the top of the Tower of Dawn, Farah instructs the prince on how to recapture the sands of time inside the hourglass. However, at the last moment, the prince hesitates and brings up Farah's legitimate reasons to mistrust and hate him, but his hesitation cost them dearly. His hesitation allowed the vizier to use the sands of time against them. He knocks the prince from the hourglass and attempts to steal the dagger to himself when the prince chooses to save Farah instead. Before he loses his grip on the calaman he caught, he lets go and snatches the dagger of time from the vizier's grasp. The two fall into a dark tomb and believe they've lost the fight against the vizier. Traveling in the dark, Farah learns that the prince does not like small spaces and shares with him the story of the secret word Kakalukiam that her mother said would open a secret doorway. While the prince dismisses her story as childish, the prince finds himself traveling through a secret passage in search of Farah, who disappeared shortly after telling him the story. The prince travels down a winding stairway into a circular room with a fountain in its center. The prince repeatedly is beckoned to join Farah from a place he cannot see or find. Eventually he learns to follow the sounds of water and finds Farah bathing in an illuminated bath. She beckons him to join her in the water, and he does, unaware that he was fooled into removing the dagger and his sword from his person. The prince joins Farah and the water, and the two proceed to make love. When the prince awakens, he is back in the tomb, questioning whether what he experienced was a dream or real. He realizes too late that his sword and dagger of time were missing along with Farah, who has left the medallion of time behind. The prince acquires another sword and pursues Farah back to the top of the Tower of Dawn, attempting to dissuade her from using what remained of the sands of time in the dagger. When the prince catches up with her, she is being attacked by Sand generals and is knocked over the ledge above the hourglass of time. The prince catches the blade of the dagger, preventing her from falling. Farah, realizing that he won't let go of the dagger, chooses to do so herself and falls to her death. The prince fights the last of the sand creatures, but realizes too much has passed to save Farah from the fall that killed her. He steps into the final sand vortex and experiences a vision of places he once traveled through by himself and with Farah. When he reaches the bottom, he mourns the loss of Farah.
No. The girl is unimportant.
Before the arrival of the vizier, the vizier tries to convince the prince to take immortality for himself, but the prince refuses. Heartbroken, he chooses death. In a fit of rage, Prince uses the dagger and triggers a ground rewind, returning the sands into the hourglass. Time reverts to the point prior to the attack on the Maharaja's palace. As a result, the relationship between Farah and himself is a memory that only he remembers. However, the prince still has the dagger in his possession. Even in the past, he heads for the Maharaja's palace and enters Farah's bedroom. Farah, who appears to be awakened from a nightmare, is startled by the appearance of the prince when he reveals to her that he possesses the dagger of time. She asks him how he was able to get it. The prince chooses instead to warn her of the visor's treachery before the sands are released, retelling what happened in the timeline was undone. When the prince reaches the end of his story, the visor appears in Farah's bedroom with the intention killing Farah and blaming its murder on the prince. Farah retreats to a corner in her room while the prince fights the visor's enchanted doubles. When the visor becomes weakened from the exertion of his powers, the prince is able to kill him once and for all. After defeating the visor, the prince offers the dagger to Farah. She questions him why he needed to invent such a fantastic story. Instead of answering her, he kisses her. Farah rejects his kiss, so he rewinds one last time before he kissed her. The prince chooses instead to agree with her that his account of the vice's treachery was just a story, and he leaves her. She asks him for a name. Before he departs, the prince asks her to call him Kakalukian. When he leaves, a dumbfounded Farah realizes that he used her mother's secret word, something only she would know about. Hello guys, I hope you liked the video. Make sure to subscribe, like and comment down below, and be patient with me because soon I will make part 2 and 3 for the trilogy of Prince of Persia. I will cover it all. See you soon. Bye.